Hi, my name is Amber Semerow, and you're listening to the Homeschool Success Stories podcast, where I interview homeschool moms. Hi, welcome to today's episode of the Homeschool Success Stories podcast. This is episode number 2, and I will be interviewing Meryl van der Merwe. She was originally from South Africa and moved to the United States many years ago and continues to help homeschoolers today. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Let's get to it.
Okay, so you can hear from my accent, and my last name, I'm not American. I actually am South African, and I have 4 children. And initially, we were all living in South Africa, but we moved across to America when the children were between the ages of 3 and 13. And we had never planned to homeschool. Back in South Africa, the boys were in a private school, and my older daughter was in a small girls' school just around the corner from us. The younger one was too young, obviously. But when we got to America, we discovered that the local schools weren't academically of very high standard at that point. And my children and South African education is just really good. So we had arrived here in the January of 2003. My kids had just finished a year of school because in South Africa it runs in the calendar year, and we just planned to homeschool for a few months. But it's turned out to be such a good fit. The children realized how much quicker they were learning. We also discovered that the local schools weren't very challenging. My daughter took what here is called TCAPS, which is the standardized testing system you have to do in 5th and 7th grade if you're homeschooling here under the county, and tested out at grades 12 plus. Now, although my kids are reasonably smart, they are no geniuses, and at 12, she definitely was not ready to go to college. And that also made me realize that perhaps homeschooling would be a better fit. And so we started homeschooling, and I had to figure it out as I went. It wasn't easy because, I say, she was then going into 8th grade, and my son, the youngest son, was in 3rd grade, and the other one was in 5th. And then I still had a toddler who drove us crazy. And I did not understand the American system. I didn't understand how credits worked. We don't do anything like that in South Africa. So
Interesting.
it was a big learning system, learning curve. And my oldest one at that point was sort of talking about that she wanted to go to Harvard. Well, she didn't end up even applying to Harvard, but I obviously felt the huge pressure on how's this going to turn out? Am I actually going to do her in by homeschooling her? Am I going to do okay? It was pretty scary, and I just had to sort of follow my gut and do what I thought, because I'm not a trained teacher. My background is English and German major, and then I worked as a computer programmer.
Mm-hmm.
So this was just entirely new. Apart from teaching Sunday school, I had
Yeah,
nothing else.
yeah. Okay, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the South African school system and what things you liked that maybe you incorporated into your homeschool.
Right. So South Africa is much more focused on teaching kids to think than I think the American system is. And so, for instance, we don't really have multiple choice questions. That isn't a thing. Um, Instead, you would get short questions, short with short answers, or you'd write
Mm,
essays as you're getting older. But even young kids wouldn't do multiple choice. And so that meant that you actually had to understand the work and you really had to study it.
yeah,
An A there is 80%, and it was hard to get, which meant that tests could be really a lot harder. So to get like a 95% would be crazy. I mean, I did occasionally get that when I was a kid growing up, and I was so proud of myself. Whereas here, you pretty much know your kid has to get 95 most of the time if they want to
right.
even go
Or
for
they
an
don't
A,
know it
which
at
is
all.
right, it was really hard for me to actually come that. So one of the things which I think I probably because of that came out is that I really focused on the idea of mastery. So
Mm,
I would give my children, like, so they'd be writing an English essay,
mm-hmm.
and they would give it to me, and I would read it, and I would realize that there was grammar mistakes, or they'd missed the point, or whatever else. I wouldn't take that as their final grade. I would talk to them about it, point out all the errors, and then say to them, okay, now go and correct it.
Yeah.
And I would pretty much make them do that, the same thing if they were doing math or science or whatever else. Um, and it wasn't like when they did a math test that I would give them, they would have to do a completely different test if they were having to take the test again. but I was focused on them actually really learning the work. And so if I
Uh-huh.
was going to give them an A, if it was going to be a 95, they may take 2 or 3 attempts to get there, but I would feel that then they had the quality.
Yeah. Oh, that I really like that. I think that is really good. Um, so do you want to talk about your philosophy and your favorite curriculum?
So, of course, I wasn't a teacher. I had no idea. I didn't even know how to
Mm-hmm.
choose curriculum when I came. But I was kind of fortunate in that the church we were going to had a really big homeschool group, and the mom who was leading the group, she was using Sonlight curriculum, and she told me about it. Now, before I went for it, I actually looked at other things. I went to a little local homeschool curriculum fair and looked at
And
other things.
about what year was this?
This is 2003. So it was
Okay.
2000. It was the August of 2003
Yeah.
when I started full-time homeschooling.
Okay.
And so the kids were then grades 3 through 8.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked Sonlight for a couple of reasons. They have there, if you've ever looked at the curriculum, they used to have like 31 reasons either two or not to homeschool with Sonlight. I can't remember, but here are some of my reasons to use them. First of all, I like the fact it was literature rich. I am an English major, so that really appealed to me that there was a lot of reading involved, a lot of living books. They don't like textbooks, nor do I. And so I love that. I love that the kids were reading and discussing and writing, and that was really a good fit for us. I like the fact that they integrated the history and the English. So if you're studying US history, you're reading books about US history. And I would add to that, we're a very techie family as well. So I would add to that by adding in video games that related to what we were studying. We'd be watching movies relating to what we were studying as well. So I try to give a holistic experience of whatever we were doing. I'm less hands-on, but even that, I mean, I remember reading about the Ferris wheel and my son sitting and with his connects building a Ferris wheel while we were doing
Yeah,
it. So
that's
I
awesome.
tried I tried to, just really take it from every angle so we would really be immersed. And we also traveled a lot. So even travel, we would try to go to the places we were studying to make it
Yeah.
an immersive experience.
Yeah.
So that's and I like the fact that Sonlight, I mean, a lot of people think Sonlight is hard and that there's a lot of work. I like the rigor of Sonlight.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it encouraged thought and um, different, perspectives. I liked the fact that there was a decent amount of work because I wanted my kids to be ready for a challenging college career.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what your kids are doing now and how that helped them?
Right. Well, my oldest daughter went to Biola and did a film major and went on then to Claremont McKenna and did her master's in media and communication and is now at CU Boulder doing her PhD in the same. And she's in fact right now in South Africa just doing her final research and
And what is her PhD? What did she get her PhD in?
it's in communication and media and something to do with South Africa and apartheid. And I know I should know more, but it's so confusing to me. But
Okay.
my husband said it's beyond our
That's
pay grade.
awesome. So I'm sure
So
she feels like she was well prepared for that. Did
yes,
you
she
do
does actually
sunlight? Did
say,
you do sunlight the whole way through?
we did. I did. And I liked, the other thing I liked about it was that you could actually, of course, combine ages. So it didn't always work out, but especially when they were younger, at least two of them would be doing the same one at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. And but I did try to do it so that like everybody would be doing US history, even if one was doing the high school version and the younger, because it helped with like the computer games and
Yeah.
watching videos and things
Yeah, for
together.
sure. Definitely.
So we did that. So what she did. And then my next son decided to apply to Stanford, and I didn't think he had a hope, but he was initially deferred, and then he actually won the Coca-Cola scholarship. He won their like big amount, and I
Wow.
think that tipped the scales because you can like send it in, and so he sent in that he got that. He won a lot. All my kids won a lot of scholarship money, and he was accepted to Stanford, and so he did his degree at Stanford, and he's now working as a programmer at Strava, which is used by cyclists and runners. It's an app.
Excellent. We may have to do a follow-up on scholarships and how
This
you
is
did
something I
it
know a
and
lot about.
yeah. So
Yeah.
were
So
a lot of them like writing scholarships or just
no, just a whole. In fact, to do writing ones, I discovered was really hard. I didn't know what I was doing with my oldest. She had to do the most scholarships, and she wrote a lot. And she was also our best writer, and she only won a few small ones. So after that, I
Interesting.
realized that that wasn't a good fit, and I should rather try and find other ones. So a lot of them were more community service based. My kids did a lot of
Oh,
community
okay.
service.
Okay.
It just
That's
just different things. There are a lot of different ones.
great.
Some of them that my kids one wasn't there. Then my third son, he went to NYU for a year and a half, but while he was there, he didn't find the classes very challenging. It's very expensive, and he started programming and creating his own app. Came second with another guy at the New York Stern Business School. They have an entrepreneurship contest, and in his freshman year they came second in that contest, and as a result he went off to South by Southwest, met a lot of people, and eventually got funding for his app and developed that. The app lasted for, I don't know, a year or two, and then Instagram came out with the Instagram stories, and it was sort of very similar, and so the whole thing didn't have longevity, but he did have thousands of people on the app, and he learned so much from the whole experience. And so he decided not to go back to college because really he'd learned more than he could have there, and
Yeah. Well, he's
subsequently
got, yeah.
he worked in Berlin for a while, and now for the last couple of years, he's been working in NY, back in New York City, and he's been working for a startup called Flip, and that's what he's been doing. And
Interesting.
my youngest is now a second-year college student doing Spanish and with a business minor in international business. And she, in fact, though, did not stay homeschooling. When she got to 8th grade, she was the only one at home because there's 5 years between her and her brother, and she really wanted the school experience that her siblings had in South Africa. So she
Mm-hmm.
asked, could she please go to a public school? And by that stage, our local high school had actually become an IB school. So there was a lot more rigor. And so she went, and I don't regret the experience, though I will say if your kids aren't wanting to go to school and it isn't a good reason, I can tell you right now, my three who are homeschooled all the way through learned so much more than she did. There's just a lot of time wasted, etc.
Yeah.
However, that being
Interesting.
said,
So even though it was a good school and it was a good fit for her, you feel like the education of your three older ones is just more extensive.
oh, much better, even though I didn't know everything. I mean, I'm not a
Yeah.
scientist. We had to do science and things, with other people. We did use our local co-op, so Spanish, for instance, they did there. Um, but I would look around and try and find the best curriculum for everything. I say, obviously, Sonlight was our base, but then I added to it
Mm-hmm.
we did a lot of electives. We did a lot more credits than we needed so that they could explore what they were interested in and, figure out for college and just so that they were very well rounded.
Do you think some of that too is just because they have more time to delve deeper into their interests?
Definitely. You've just got so much more time because you don't have all that time, wasted on having to wait for the slowest student in the class and
Right.
just all the other random stuff that happens in school. I mean, my
Right.
daughter got to the point where she was really good at learning how to skip as many of her classes as possible. She would plan her orthodontic visits and things so that she wouldn't have to return to school. She'd pick those on days when she knew it was completely worthless.
Yeah.
So I always kind of said she eventually had a hybrid of public schooling and homeschooling because she learned how to legally miss as much as she could,
Yeah. So
because it was just wasted.
does she regret going to school now?
No,
That,
no, not at all. She did not have a wonderful experience. It was rather like Mean Girls because she was the South African homeschooler who went to public school. And the stereotypes were all there. In fact, she wrote a college essay starting with a quote from Mean Girls, because that was really, it was her experience. She
yeah,
talked about,
yeah.
experiencing different cultures and things. But she still knew that she would have struggled if she'd been at home the whole time. So she
Well, by
didn't
herself,
love it.
it's kind of a different thing when you're. I think it is easier when you have a siblings to.
Fight with.
Yeah.
I know, and it wasn't like we were sitting at home. We were very involved
Yeah.
in 4-H. My kids all did lots of competitions, so
Mm-hmm.
that was another big way because I realized that my kids had aspirations to get into harder to get into colleges, and so me just giving them a bunch of A's wasn't going to mean anything. So we did AP exams, and that was the one way that I knew that they would be competing and they'd be
Yeah.
able to be seen against everybody in America.
Right. Right.
Then we did a lot of competitions, and these were not homeschool competitions. They were just Science Olympiad, National History Day, Optimus Cup,
Yeah.
Oracle Contest, ones that were national, and the admissions councils would know what they were. And so when
Yes.
my kids were achieving that at state, and all my kids got to national level in something, they would show them that they actually were capable, and that they weren't the kind of homeschoolers who were sitting on their bed in their PJs
Right.
doing
Right.
nothing else. No
Yeah.
problem with sitting on your bed in your PJs as long as you're doing something
Yeah.
useful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So what would your schedule kind of look like? What would a typical day be?
Okay, so I'm a firm believer in having a schedule. I'm not the unschooler type in any sense. That said, I also think that every child is different. And so they were allowed to start school when they wanted to, with I think 9 o'clock being the latest they were allowed to. So some of them preferred starting a bit later and working later, and some of them started, like my oldest daughter, like started at 6:30 in the morning. The boys were no way going to be doing that. So they were two.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they had more time as they got older. When they were younger, lunchtime and you're done.
Yeah.
Older, of course, my kids were really, my children are very academic, and they did enjoy it, and we did a lot of electives. So it wasn't just that they were doing a whole lot of sort of super hard subjects, and we'd mix them up, and they could also figure out how they wanted to do that. So they could, do some math, and then stop and do history, and then, do art history or whatever it was. And they also didn't all do this exactly the same electives, depending on their own interests, etc. So the most times we would work, from breakfast to lunch. South African, we eat lunch like 1 o'clock, 1:30. So that will be a later lunch. We'd have a break in the morning for mid-morning tea because we're South African. So 11 o'clock would
Yeah.
be
Okay.
a snack break, and then we'd go
Mm-hmm.
back. And then the afternoon would be sort of on their own schedule, but they'd have to finish anything that was supposed to fit in, because some afternoons would have 4-H or basketball or ice skating, or I mean, the kids were doing
Yeah.
all typical stuff.
Right. Right.
They were busy, so they would have to figure out. So they were normally still working at sort of 9 or 10 at night, unless they were doing something in the evening, and then they'd be working in the afternoon. That
Yeah.
was when they were at high school. As I say, when they were younger, say 4 hours was plenty, and then you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that with my kids too. They can be done in 2-3 hours if they really focus.
Right,
Um,
right,
and then that gives you, and that's one thing that I have liked, is then we have time to go do other things. We can go to the
right.
park, we can go on a hike. Um, but yeah, definitely it's always helpful to have the curriculum, and then kind of like your checklist, so they know what they need to do.
Right.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much how our schedule has gone. Although I don't think we've been able to do as much as my kids probably just aren't as academic as your kids.
Yeah, I
Some
know.
of them
Again,
are.
it's different. Mine just my younger one is the least academic, and that's so it's also for her. I think she liked school because she could be a little lazier there.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
required a little more of them. So the older, but my younger son, he by the time he was a senior, half the time he'd only work one day every week or 2 weeks. He was busy writing programs for other people and earning a lot of money like that. And
Oh,
then he would just kind of
nice.
sit, and so
He's the one that eventually wrote the app.
yes, yes, and he's still working for that.
Yeah.
And so company,
Well, and how
and
do you put a
he would
price
work.
on that, right?
Right. So eventually I realized, well, he wasn't doing anything, terrible. So I just kind of gave up. And so he did finish everything, and he was an AP scholar with distinction. And
Yeah.
so, he did things, and, he did well, and he was still doing all the competitions and everything else that got them to do. And he did reach national level and National History Day. So
Yeah.
I'm like,
I know
I couldn't complain.
it is kind of weird when they get to that, point where they're ready to kind of move on from homeschooling. It's
Hmm.
like, okay, well, that's it. That's it. We're
I
done.
know.
But then they have this solid foundation. My hope is they will go off and do whatever they want. They won't be, what's the word? Stifled or held
Right.
back because they didn't learn something that they should have.
And the interesting thing is that, he's the one that dropped out of NYU. Whenever he goes and visits my parents who live in England, they like to put on the really difficult British quiz program. My dad was stunned by what my son knows. And it's not just from what he learned while he was homeschooling, but what he has continued to learn. He reads
Yes.
prolifically, classics and everything else, because the cool thing is, which I feel is my biggest success, is that I
Mhm.
taught him to love learning. And so they have
Yes.
continued to be lifelong learners. So he has taught himself 3 more languages since he left home. He's 25 now. He has read countless books, lots of nonfiction. He reads just extensively and keeps up with things, and just always knows crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's because him learning is interesting. I also watched as my kids started traveling by themselves, how they
Mhm.
would all go to museums of their own choice. And I was like, wow, because growing up as a kid, when my parents mentioned the word museum, I just thought boring. And if you said art museum, I'd have thought they'd lost their mind. All my children have, of their own accord, gone to art museums around the world. And that's
Awesome.
because we started studying art, which I knew nothing about. So I learned
Yeah.
it with them. It's the thing, you
Yeah.
don't have to know anything to actually homeschool a subject. You
True.
just do
True.
it with them. And so we learned. And so now I know not a ton, but I know some now about art, which I knew nothing
Mhm.
before, and they will do. But I can now appreciate an art museum. I can spend
Yeah.
a few hours in there now and actually find it an enjoyable experience.
Yeah. Awesome. That's fantastic. Okay, so that moves into my next question, which is what have you done well in your homeschool? And then we'll talk about mistakes. Or
Well,
if you want to talk about mistakes first, or either way.
um, well, done well. I mean, I think just the whole, I do like the fact that they loved learning, and I do think I did provide them with a good basis for everything. So that when they've gone on to college, none of them struggled with any subject, and I
Mhm.
think that was it. I think I think many of my mistakes to go to that were actually in the beginning. And so what I would say is don't beat yourself up. You will make mistakes. It's just you can't get this right first time because there isn't one perfect way. The whole point about being a successful homeschooler is making it fit your family and your kids. So
Amen.
when you so when you start, so I mean, yeah, please don't, if your kids aren't very academic and studying is a struggle, please don't do what I did and go out and enroll them in every competition. My kids are A-type personalities, they're very competitive. So if they were just sitting at home, I think this is one of the things I did well, is doing the competitions.
Mhm.
Because that made them achieve their best. If they're just doing it for me, they don't care. My oldest one did.
Yeah.
Boys, no.
Yeah.
But if they're like part of a team, they don't want to look like the one that's let the team down. If they're
Yes.
competing, they want to try and do best to come back with a medal, with a win, moving on to the next level, whatever it is, because that's in them. So obviously, it also gave me a chance to teach them how to lose, which is important. So they lost as many
Mhm.
times as they won things,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was heartbreaking. But I told them to pick themselves up, and there was always the next competition they were getting ready for around the corner, so they didn't have much time to feel sorry for themselves and had to keep going.
Yeah.
But I think, as I said, I don't really look back and have any thought like, oh, I really don't think I should have done this. There were various different curriculum that didn't work along the way. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm going to say this out there. The biggest one I think I made the mistake on was teaching textbooks.
Was what?
Teaching textbooks for
Oh,
math.
okay.
That's
Yeah,
the
because
one
I've
thing we
heard
had to redo.
homeschoolers. Yeah, I've heard homeschoolers talk about those. I haven't really looked at them.
So now when you do teaching textbooks, and again, this is for me. I'm not saying
Mhm.
it's the best, it's the worst one for anyone else. For my kids,
Mhm.
it was not a good fit. It's very appealing because it now self-grades, so you can put the answers on the computer. Now, in my day, there wasn't an option, so we were still doing it on, in the paper books, and they were doing it. The problem is it's easy, so it's good for kids who struggle with math. And what is really cool is they've got CD-ROMs with completely worked out examples. So if you're a mom who doesn't know how to do math, they walk you through it. And
Mhm.
I think that is an extremely cool feature. So I'm not completely knocking them.
Yeah.
However, if you've got a kid who wants to go into engineering or computer programming or whatever else, it's light. So
Mhm.
we discovered Life of Fred, which I love, love, love. And
Mhm.
we didn't have all the younger ones at that age, but my youngest son started to do Life of Fred, and he was doing much better in the standardized testing. So my oldest son, we've done teaching textbooks, and I didn't realize it wasn't academic enough.
Mhm.
And so what when he went into his ACT, he actually didn't do really well on math, and he's good at math. And I was
Mm.
shocked. And that was when I realized, and then I started to read up, and I realized other people had said the same thing. You will find this online if you look. A lot of people will say it's not rigorous enough. And so I just realized I needed to change, and then we moved to Life for Fred at that point. The problem was he couldn't go into Life for Fred Trig because he hadn't done everything that they cover in Life for Fred
Right,
Advanced
right.
Algebra. Teaching textbooks did not cover the same stuff, so he had to go back and redo the advanced algebra before you could keep going. So
Mm.
that was the one thing. And then he did, for calculus, he did Thinkwell. And my older daughter had done Thinkwell because he did not like Life of Fred calculus. That didn't work for him.
Mm.
So again, we switched. When
Mhm.
something doesn't work for your kids, switch.
Switch, yeah.
Math was the one we seemed to switch the most.
Yeah, yeah.
But he came back and said that for my next son, he said, you've got to find something more rigorous. He didn't feel that Thinkwell calculus was rigorous enough because he was the one who went to Stanford. He said it just wasn't, it didn't prepare him that well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we actually switched to art of problem solving and the calculus through them. But the format was weird. And I don't know that they've changed. Maybe they have, but it was online, but it wasn't video. So I was expecting video on a blackboard, where they'd write the
Yeah.
answers. Instead, it was just all text. It was like this big chat thingy. And
Hmm.
my younger son just couldn't focus like that. He would just pay no attention and then go look at the transcript afterwards and figure out what they were doing. But it was more rigorous, the actual stuff. And you can also do it without doing online. You can
And
just
this
buy the
was
books.
Thinkwell, is that what you said?
No, that was art of problem solving. That worked really
Art
well
of
for me.
problem solving. Okay.
Art of problem solving. They
Okay.
also they have contests and various other things. So it's a good one for kids who want more rigorous math.
Okay. That's good to know. So is there anything else in your homeschool journey as you look back that you would do differently besides, well, I mean, and it's not really that you would do that differently because a lot of curriculum especially is trial and error, I've found. And,
Right.
with different kids and also their different interests and what they want to do. But overall, is there something that you would do differently?
I don't think so, actually. I mean, if I was doing it now, I would do differently because there's more technology out there.
Yeah.
Um, But if you took me back to that same point in time, I think I would have done it. I loved Sonlight, didn't regret it at all. I don't know that I would really change much up at all. I love the fact that we were working together as a family. We made family memories because we tried to do, I tried as much as possible to keep us, on the same era that we were studying in history at least, and
Mm-hmm.
geography. We did geography all together as much as possible as
Mm-hmm.
well.
That's
I don't
awesome.
I don't really think so. And I did also the other thing which I did and I did not regret doing is I involved the children as they got older in the decisions. I would show them, the different curricula, for instance, even in math, and I'd say, which one would you prefer to use? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, I would narrow it down. I mean, I wouldn't give
Yeah,
them 20,
yeah.
tell them to choose. I mean, I
Right.
would look and think,
You
okay,
have to do
these,
calculus.
right. These are your two options. Which one would you prefer?
Yeah.
The good thing about that is that if they pick one and they hate it, they picked
Yeah,
it.
right. That is good.
They
That's
can't
a good
blame you.
tip. That's right. Because it is their education too. So
Right.
yeah, I think it's really important to involve the kids.
Um,
That's awesome. That's got to feel good to you looking back at, like it worked. You did it well.
I
So
feel like that
yeah.
overall.
Well, thank
We
you
had bad
for,
days, many bad days. I mean, very frustrating. So it's not like this was like a rah rah. I mean, we could have been a sitcom. We had
yeah.
plenty of bad moments.
No, it's hard. I mean, yeah, it's hard to do a good job and to follow up and to get everything done.
Yeah,
It's you but what the one mom said that I interviewed 2 days ago, she said it's so rewarding. It's
it
so
was.
fulfilling in the end.
Mhm.
It is a lot of hard work, but you just feel so good that you're able to give your kids just more and time and like you
Yeah.
said, the love of learning. So what would you say is an absolute must do for having a homeschool program?
I would say this is something that people don't always do, is you need to cater it to your children. I think that's perhaps my biggest must do, is to see each of your children as individuals, and especially as they're getting into the high school years,
Mm-hmm.
not just with the curriculum, don't necessarily use the same one. I mean, like for instance, economics, I use something different for my boys who are interested. We actually use Thinkwell. To my daughter who didn't care.
Yeah.
And we did something different because she wasn't likely to go on to need to know more of it or do more of it at college, whereas them, they actually did the AP, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then with electives, I see too many people doing the bare minimum and just getting exactly the number of credits they need, whereas I
Uh-huh.
saw that as being the way of adding the fun in. So I
Yeah,
would ask my kids, what do you want to do? Adding the fun and helping them with our career exploration,
I
just in
love
what they were
that.
doing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that I totally agree with that. Yeah, I am learning so much from interviewing people like, yeah, of course, customize it, talk to your kids, get them involved because of course, like they're individuals and that's ultimately what we're doing is getting them ready to enter the world and to do what they want to do.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay, it looks like we've pretty much covered all the questions. Let me just go through these last ones. What is the best thing about homeschooling?
The time you spend with your kids, which is probably also the worst thing about homeschooling, if that was your next question. But it does just give you all those extra hours and learning with them because you have this shared knowledge.
Hmm.
So it was fun as we traveled and we'd see a street name or something, or they would bring back something from some book we'd all read, all the books. And I did everything with them. So with Sonlight, I read every book and I reread ones that I'd done before. And I read everything. So we have this huge shared memory together, which has been very special.
That's awesome. So with Sonlight, you mentioned that you did history and geography together. Um, the other subjects, did you just kind of help the kids with it as they went through, or?
Right. Yes. They would, we would use whatever we were using. We did Singapore math with the younger one, first of all. And then I said high school, I went through everything from video text, Thinkwell. We did something else for geometry, which I can't remember once with one kid, but they would do it and I would grade it. My kids liked me to grade it. They wanted me to see that
Mm-hmm.
they had got it right or whatever. Plus, with my boys, I really needed to grade it to make sure they'd actually done it. So there was
Mm-hmm.
that. I did
Yeah.
hold them very accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it was time consuming. I mean, this was the 4 kids. It's literally I did follow up with everything. So they did do math and grammar and things at their own levels.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would do so, and obviously as they got to high school it was, but even then there were quite a few things we could do because my boys are only 2 years apart, that they would both be doing at the same time, which would make it a little easier on the grading when they were both writing essays on
Yeah,
same
yeah.
topics.
Awesome. Um, what has been the hardest part of homeschooling?
The time.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, when I had like all 4 of them, there was just no time. And it was long hours because I did grade every single thing that they wrote. And then I would give
Mm-hmm.
it back to them. And if they hadn't done a good enough job, I would get them to redo it. As I said, my whole system of mastery was hardest on me
Mm-hmm.
because I had to keep looking over it. So that I found was probably the part I hated the most, was grading.
Yeah.
And I still do now that I teach online. I
Like,
I employ people as teaching assistants to do the grading because I still do that for, I
mm-hmm.
think that need that accountability. They need someone to have actually seen what they did. Um, I
Yeah.
just don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the hardest part too,
Yeah,
is keeping them accountable, making sure they
yeah.
did it and checking it and yeah.
And I think, just onto that is also separating that role of mom and teacher. Because I
Yeah.
would find like we'd sit down, I had already stopped myself. This is okay, maybe a regret, and this is something that I wish I'd been even better at earlier, is you'd sit down at dinner and at last you had all 4 of them sitting facing you, and then it'd be like, did you finish this? Did you
Yeah.
remember to do that? Did
Yeah.
you did you do that? And
Yeah.
realizing this is not the time, this is dinner time. And if
Mm-hmm.
you might, if one of the kids brings up something they studied, great, it will often lead into good discussion. But it's not the time to nag them about what they have and haven't done about the schoolwork. And that was hard, is to kind of like try to find time, especially as I got into the high school years. to try and separate and going, okay, now I'm just going to be a mom and I have to like forget about all those things I'm irritated with them about at school.
Yeah.
And that was also, to me, it was hard making that conscious decision to switch between the roles.
Yeah. So how were you able to do that? What did you end up
I would
figuring
literally
out?
have to give myself time. I would literally like, okay, school stops at 6 o'clock at night or whatever, or
Mhm.
meal times, and literally not bring it up at meal times, not talk about
Mm,
it on Sunday, not talk about it, that sort of thing. And
okay.
especially with my younger son, the one who kind of did lots of other things when his senior year, I would sort of limit everything to, say, first thing in the morning. So I would meet
Mm,
him, talk to him about everything, and then that was done for the day
yeah.
till the next
That's a
day. And
good
we'd say
that's
the
a
same
good
thing.
tip. That's a good tip because it does become your life. But
Yeah,
you do have to find a balance because we
right.
can't be doing academics 24/7, right?
And it's just the fact that, you as homeschool mom know when they haven't done all the work they were supposed to do or whatever
Yes.
else.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's, normally you don't, if your kids are at school, you don't know what they haven't done or they haven't done well.
Right.
Suddenly,
Right.
you know everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Okay. What key things gave you success, do you think? What are the key things?
I think the fact that I'm very, when I decide I'm going to do something, I try to do it well. So I try to do that with the homeschooling too. So I spent a lot of time in researching. I read a lot of books when I started out. And as my kids were getting, to college age, I started looking to see what are colleges wanting, how they're going to get into these colleges. I also started following teachers, the good teachers, and particularly as I started teaching at a local co-op and then started teaching online as well. And so, I mean, there are fantastic teachers out there who've got some really good tips. And so I started listening to their podcasts and reading their books and following their
Oh,
blogs to actually learn about best practices and just all that there is out there. And I
that's a
think that
great
helped.
tip. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, there are some fantastic teachers. It's
Mhm.
sometimes they're stuck in schools that really makes it hard for them to do a good job. But I really had to learn to be a teacher,
Mhm.
and so I did, as best as I could. So I'll never have that degree to say that I did it, but I think I've probably learned more useful stuff than most teachers who go off, because I've learned from people who really are doing it well.
Yeah. Well,
And I
I
mean,
think
obviously, homeschool parents too. I've been, also reading, good blogs, and there
mhm.
weren't podcasts that, when I started, but
Yeah. Well, I
it
think it's
helped.
awesome that you're continuing to teach and continuing to help in the homeschool community.
Well,
I
I
think
love it.
that's
I
great.
feel like I'm a homeschooler for life. And
Yeah.
so I've stayed teaching. Even when my daughter went off to school, we decided that. So I still coach our local Science Olympiad and Scholars Bowl teams, our Quiz Bowl high school. And then, I mean, I teach online at Funda Academy and teach a whole bunch of different subjects there. And I love the interaction with the students,
Yeah.
because that's, I've discovered along the way that teaching is probably the thing that I was always meant to do, and I would never have
Mhm.
known that if I hadn't started homeschooling.
Yeah,
And
wow.
teaching at co-op, it's a much better fit for me than the computer programmer that I was for a couple of
Yeah.
years.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So, do you have any more tips or recommendations for people starting out homeschooling?
Yeah, there is one thing now, looking at the fact that I'm teaching other people's kids,
Mm-hmm.
is, as I'm seeing that, I think it's, first of all, is include technology from the start.
Mm.
Um, Teach your kids to use it well, to be responsible, but also include it. My podcast is homeschooling with technology,
Mm-hmm.
and I cover so many different areas and things, and how to include this. But I get a lot of times kids join in my high school classes, whether it's my co-op or online. And even my co-op, they have to work online, because I use an online classroom to deliver all the material. And so many kids, the parents have decided that tech is a bad thing and they keep them away from it. Well, it doesn't really matter what you think about tech. It's here and it's here to stay.
Yeah.
And your kids need to know it's just like you can't decide. I think malls could be a dangerous place for my kids. So my kids are never going to go there.
Right.
You have to walk them through it. I actually have a whole podcast episode where I kind of talk people through how to slowly introduce it in a smart fashion as they're getting older. And you need to make sure that they can just do the basics. I know now that we've had to go online. Currently, we're having to be online at our co-op, and some teaching with Zoom. And I had one parent come and say, "I don't have time to sit with my child. This is a middle school class, and my child doesn't know how to do anything online on Google." Because I'd say, "Okay, go and
You're
search for
like,
this."
they got to learn.
By middle school, they should be all having their own emails. They should know how to save files. They should know how to use all the Google Drive, things.
Mm-hmm.
They should know the basics of how to, create graphics or whatever else. And as they get older, they all need to know how to code. Whether they're going to be a programmer or not, they should know at least the basics. My oldest daughter, as I said, is doing her PhD in media and communication. About
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, she sent me a picture of code. She goes, "Mom, I'm so glad you made me learn to code." Now, she just did 1 year and she didn't like it and she didn't do any more. But she had to actually use like a very simple programming language, but they had to like search the database to find movies, and it was whole part of the research project she was doing. But she needed to be able to code, and I
Yeah.
mean, she's in an area where you'd never expect code to be
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah.
And so it's not the fact that everybody needs to be a programmer. That's a different story.
Right.
you know, Not everybody needs to know it on a high degree, but if you think about it, everybody needs to know how to write. Not everyone's
Yeah.
going to be an author. You
Yeah.
all need to know how to do math. You're
Right.
not going to become a statistician, but you
Mm-hmm.
need that basic. It's the same thing. Kids need to know how to code.
Yeah.
So you need to somehow figure that, and all the basics. You need to know how to do slideshows before they get to
Mm-hmm.
college. All the
Yeah.
basics. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing that you're getting some parents who don't know it themselves, are scared about it, and don't understand, and so are really impeding their students.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow, that is really good. Um, yeah, we will, if you can send me your podcast and your teaching classes, online classes and stuff, I can put
Well,
that in the show notes for this so people can find you and learn more. Um, and then any other, like I'll probably put Sonlight in there and Life of Fred, and uh, if you could remind me of the other.
I will. Art of problem solving. Yeah, I'll send you
Yeah.
everything. So
Okay,
yeah.
that'll be great. And so we'll put that in the show notes. But thank you so much for sharing all this. It's been very enlightening and very helpful. I think it'll be really helpful for a lot of people too out there. Because, yeah, I mean, if you want to go super academic, there you go. That's how you do it right there.
Yeah, and we did it without dual enrollment classes as well. That's another way of going. So, hopefully you'll
Yeah,
have someone on who does it that way, because there is dual enrollment and you can do it that way too. But I chose APs just because it's more standardized. Dual
yeah,
enrollment, it depends on how good the community college is.
true,
It's
true.
not, and so many colleges will not accept that. And
Right.
so I know that which you can look on their website and know what they'll accept for APs. It was a way
Yeah,
that my kids also got out of a lot of classes and went in with a lot of credits.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, a special thanks to Meryl Vandermeer for coming on the podcast. She's one of my very first interviews, and wow, I just loved everything that she had to say. I hope that you loved it too, and that it's been helpful for you and encouraging to you on your journey and figuring out what to do in your homeschool. Um, yeah, she was one of my first interviews, and so I'm sorry about some of the audio not being great. I've since figured that out, and we'll just keep getting better and better, and I look forward to our next interview. See you then.